All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Gamemakers GDC recap. And Brett, I'm looking for you for some shit talking. I I actually met with Solomon
That's
yesterday.
exclusive for you. That's exclusive content.
Great, great. Yeah, well, you mentioned you were busting his chops too, so like I definitely would love to have you share with the audience some of the jokes that you told. But anyway, so the objective of this episode brought some folks coming back from GDC last week, but we want to focus on key learnings, trends, and maybe even some rumors. I don't know how comfortable you guys are talking about some of the secret rumors, but I think it'd be cool if we can talk about some of them more generally or things like that. But with us today to recap GDC, we have first Matthew Conterman, Director of Business Development at Super Social. We have Brett Novak, CEO at market intelligence company Liquid and Grit, and Kenneth Landon, Director of Product at Hit Factor. So again, in terms of the agenda for today, we're going to first start with key themes and trends from the conference. Second, we'll talk about GDC talks. I think, Ken, you were the only one of us who actually attended a lot of these talks. And so it would be great to know if there was
First
something of
trend.
value.
Yeah.
No one, none
But
of
yeah,
us
that's a
went
trend
to any
too.
talk.
That's a
Yeah.
trend too. Is like nobody goes to the talks anymore that I know of. But a
That's because you
third,
guys are just in the VC world now. It's actually the
uh,
most passes ever sold. They sold
oh
30,000
really? Okay.
attendees this year. Yeah.
Oh, nice, nice. And yeah, I mean, we definitely want the conference itself to be healthy and to be ongoing, just so we can keep freeloading off of the conference itself for all of our meetings. But third topic, I just want to like focus in on specific key takeaways that you guys thought were important from the conference. And finally, to the extent that you guys are comfortable sharing some of the secrets, the rumors, the word on the street, if any, I think we can kind of wrap it up with that. But starting with themes and trends, I can go ahead and kick off some of the things that I heard, but do any of you guys want to go ahead of me, or should I just jump right in?
Lead
All
the
right.
way.
All right, I'll jump in. So, gonna cover like probably five key key points or kind of themes or trends that I just saw. The first was certainly not a secret. VC investment seems to be down a lot. The investors whom I spoke with candidly stated that they have slowed down. They are not really investing very much. Their LPs, limited partners, the guys that fund their firms, have been cautioning to slow down and giving them some guidance in terms of making sure that they don't invest too heavily. And the game teams that I spoke to that were seeking funding were saying that they were actually having a very difficult time, not much luck at all getting funding. And even on the publisher side, so publishers can often invest or do publishing deals, but even for them, I'm hearing that they're writing much smaller checks. One story in particular was of a dev team that asked for almost 3 million in funding, and they got countered by a publisher for like 400K. So unfortunately, it does seem like, unfortunately for the industry, fortunately for me, because I don't want to see more game studios funded, investments down. And so that was one key trend or theme that I saw. The second is in terms of the development model, where just speaking to other game developers, there does seem to be a shift away from new game development to live ops and a dramatic focus on efficiency. So smaller budgets, tighter deadlines, more specific deliverables. And there doesn't seem to be a lot of leeway for long-term projects where investors are just kind of trusting the team to deliver and things like that. But also, guys, if you have any comments or if you want to jump in, just kind of jump in anytime to just so I don't monologue for forever. But yeah,
Yeah,
if you
no, I
guys,
wanted to
sure.
jump in actually on VC real quick
Yeah,
before we go
yeah,
too
yeah.
far. It's interesting because there's a lot of funds that raised a lot of money in 21 and 22, and they have to invest it, right? So that capital isn't necessarily called yet, but it's committed, right? And so
Mhm.
at some point they're going to have to begin investing again. Now they also are writing very large investment checks in 21 and 22 with some of that money. But what did Griffin raise for their latest fund? That was 22. I think they raised over 600 million, right? Like it wasn't too long ago that gaming funds were under $10 million and that was considered big. And now we're talking about gaming specific funds that are several $100 million that have to find ways to invest this money. And literally, they need to find ways to invest it because they have to invest this money at some point. Otherwise, they violate their contracts with their LPs. And so I don't think it's dead forever. It's just some have been burned lately by certain investments, by certain valuations, lack of exits, right? All of this comes to hurt. Now, I do think that there have been several successful wins for the VCs lately in terms of exits, whether it's sales, IPOs, et cetera. And I do think as that side of the equation starts to heat back up potentially, then they'll start investing more. And so I don't think it's a time to necessarily be discouraged. I just think if you look back at really what happened in 21 and 22, especially, and how much capital flowed into the space. And, JK, we used to talk a lot. I used to show those charts that I got from Bloomberg around the IPO capital, the VC capital, the M&A capital that was going into gaming. I think it was the 22 number was more than the prior decade before COVID combined, close to that. Like, we're talking about insane amount of capital that came in. And so when you kind of take that step back and reassess, I don't think it's dead forever. We just have to kind of get back to a rational trajectory.
In that process, to the point on these first two trends that I'm talking about, the lower VC investment as well as a more efficient development model moving towards greater discipline, auditing, smaller milestones. But the general focus here with the first two is just efficiency, right? Which is, I think I've been talking about for a few years. It's been in the coming. It's been something that's necessary, and we're kind of going through that. But leading to my third point, which does seem like the third theme for me, is that there does seem to be a lot more pain coming, whether it's in the next few months, but something like, I would assume that we've got 3 to 6 more months of additional layoffs and things like that before we're able to work our ways through a larger scale rationalization of the industry, to the point that you made, Matthew, in terms of the overinvestment that's happened and things of that nature. At GDC, there generally did seem to be two camps of people when it comes to the outlook of where we are and where we're headed in the future. There were the optimists and the pessimists in terms of the two camps. And a lot of the optimists were just like, oh yeah, things are going to be great. I know it. I feel it. But then if you ask for reasons why, there really wouldn't be a lot of reasons why, besides just like intuition, feeling, well, we've already seen a lot of pain. I think it's over. So, but those feelings seem to be, at least from the people I talk to, based more on a feeling rather than on any real reasons. The pessimists, on the other hand, did feel that there's going to be more pain, at least for the next 3 to 6 months. And the reasons that were kind of brought up were, first of all, that there are more layoffs or studio closures kind of coming. On the startup side, I would say that there has been a number of raises where in the past, where they're starting to run out of cash now, whether it's like seeds that aren't able to get their Series A or Series A, which for many of the companies during the boom times didn't even align with any milestones, right? Now I can say that for my studio as well. I mean, we couldn't have gotten funded in the current environment, just to be honest, right? But at least on our side, we kind of predicted what was going to happen right now in terms of move to efficiency and for a more difficult investment environment. So even when everyone was telling us, don't raise too much, don't raise more money now, I basically said, nope, we're going to raise as much as we can, and we did. And now we're one of the reasons why we're still alive is because of that choice. But anyway, I would go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think on the optimism versus pessimism point, it really depends on what type of studio you are and what point in your journey you are.
Mm-hmm.
I brought this point up to a friend from a different podcast that, like, if you are at a big studio and your board is asking you to make more of the same game and you're just getting super bored and you're being outcompeted by some of the biggest game developers, it's a scary time because you are like operating against tighter and tighter margins. So that's doom and gloom for you. You're not working on games you necessarily want to work on because you're being constrained. It's highly competitive, etc. If you're an indie developer and you're also making those same games, it's super difficult because you can't outspend Scopely, you can't outspend any of the big devs. But because those big companies are being constrained and being focused on what they can develop, it actually opens up an opportunity space for some of the smaller developers who are willing to go really wacky with some of their game designs. And so there is actually a significant amount of opportunity for them. The Balatros of the world, the Helldivers 2 of the world, people who have innovative takes on game development can actually make some serious headwinds right now. Now, I was talking to some VCs at like the Deconstructor Fund party, and they were very bullish on pre-seed indie developers because they see blood in the water. They can get a higher percentage than they normally could, and they're just out there looking for really interesting gameplay designs. So, and I think there is two sides of the coin. You just have to position yourself towards the positive side of the coin, and not, like I said, it's not every studio can do that. You can't be a big fish, big fish games, or whatever, and then go and do that because you are going to be constrained.
Right. And I will say the one other change that I've seen is that I think it's great that those investors are excited about some seed level founding teams or opportunities. But the other thing that I've noticed is that a lot of those investors are now asking for more. Like it's hard to just raise off of a PowerPoint anymore. It's like, okay, we also need to see a prototype of some kind before we'll invest in this in the seed. So they're asking these game studio teams, these founding teams to do a lot more before they get their initial check, which is probably a healthy thing, but it's just the new reality of where we are.
Yeah, I
So
would definitely agree that that
mhm.
is the more healthier thing. We probably should not be able to raise $2 million off of a PowerPoint presentation. That's just kind of insane.
Or a
Yeah,
$60 million Series A, like some companies were doing in 21 and 22. Like, good for them to be able to go get that money. But, you
yeah.
know,
It
I,
it
I,
does also it
that's
does
part of the
also
reason that we're seeing this right now. Is we had all this, it's the overinvestment, but it's not just the overinvestment on a gross level, it's the overinvestment of these individual investments. Like traditional VC is not about these big, bold bets so early on. It's about taking lots of very, very small bets, and one of them takes off. And when you're throwing $60 million at a PowerPoint, right? That doesn't work.
yeah. I would say that the current environment, the other impact of this though is that it's going to discourage long time horizon opportunities or projects. And so I certainly could not have gotten our company funded based upon, like I told our guys, India is going to take a while. You're going to be waiting years for us to improve. That story today would not get get thrown out of a room right today.
Yeah,
And when you look at some of these games, Monopoly Go was in soft launch for 6 years. Hearthstone was in development for many years. There's some of these bigger games that just take a really, really long time. And to fund some of these games for the period of time that they may need in order to be successful is likely not going to happen in the current environment. So I would say that those kinds of opportunities are going to be much, much more difficult to fund, even though they might make a lot of sense, right? Like look how super successful a game like Valorant or Monopoly Go or Hearthstone or any of these games that did take a super long time in development to kind of get right. I just don't see those happening anymore in the current environment. But yeah, that's just the trade-off of what's going to happen. And
I slightly disagree.
okay,
I think that there will be more investments like that. They're just going to be much smaller scale. Like you're not going
right.
to see those big, bold VC investments at an early stage. You're going to see lots
Yeah.
of different shots on goal that are much smaller scale.
Mhm.
And I think there's going to be more investor protections built in, more milestones, things like that that have to be hit to get some of the capital that's committed, right? You don't just get the check
Yeah.
up front. I think so.
but
I think VCs are going to be smarter about protecting themselves and putting those checks in place, those milestones in place. It's going to be harder for developers in that sense, but I do think that for the right developers, the right ideas, the money can be there.
I think the VCs are going to have to start looking a lot more like publishers. Like they're going to have to start adding a lot more milestones into their deals. That's the only thing that makes sense to me.
Yeah, and so Matthew, I don't disagree with anything that you said. But I do think for those long time horizon projects, the the pedigree of you and your team is going to have the bar is just a lot higher. So
Absolutely, quality will matter too, for sure. Like it's not that everyone's going to get funded like it pretty much was for a year and a half or two.
yeah, other thing coming up is that there does seem to be a lot of fire sales happening with some studios that are struggling, And even some of the bigger companies do seem to be struggling right now because of at the beginning of this. So one thing I did kind of confirm with about 4 or 5 different folks is that UA seems to have been deteriorating fairly significantly since the beginning of this year for whatever reason. And so that's also why I think more pain is coming because, and I believe that EA, the latest round of EA layoffs is now public, right? I think I'm pretty sure I saw something on my LinkedIn feed, but yeah, there's definitely in one of the reasons why I think some of the bigger companies with certain genres are having problems now. And in particular, I would say the EA issue is likely related to their Glue acquisition is that some of the old UA marketing tricks from, whether it's like a Kim Kardashian type of game or other games that target females. I mean, or a lot of that stuff is now learned by a lot of people in the industry. So a lot of those tricks are no longer as viable or relevant anymore. And so the situations that existed, for example, when Kim Kardashian came out, no one was focusing on the female audience, and you could get a $2 CPI versus a $10 CPI just because you're targeting females and have the right thing. And you've got all these marketing UA tricks that not everyone was copying yet at that time. So that we're in a different environment now. So I do think that that's the issue happening with the bigger companies that may be struggling. Why we may be seeing more pain is because of some of those things that are happening to our industry currently. Yeah, I guess I don't want to monologue too long here, but just a couple of quick additional points. First is AI and live ops seem to be a really tremendous area of focus. I kind of opted into that as well, just doing like a AI focused panel for the Gamemakers dinner that you guys attended, but also shout out to the Clever Tap team in AWS. We did a AI cross live ops talk, but a lot of people just in side discussions at some of these private events have been thinking a lot more about AI. And what we're seeing is that it's not quite like I would say almost no one really agrees. I don't think anyone is suggesting that AI has a massive impact right now on the game development content pipeline or anything like that, but that because of the rate of progress that we're seeing, and because there are certain things that you can do in the game development process using AI, that the promise of where it's going to be in literally 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years out is going to be pretty tremendous. And
Yeah, I think with AI,
okay.
we did a whole podcast on AI a couple months ago, right? And I think everything we said then is probably trash at this point because it's all evolved so rapidly. But it is the kind of thing where even if it's not impacting your workflows today and it's not doing things for you, you need to be cognizant and thinking about how it can down the road, what's coming, and how you can eventually build that in. Something that I look at a lot is like, hey, can we be more efficient down, not today, but maybe in 3, 6 months, 12 months, whatever it is, by leveraging X, Y, and Z. And those are types of things that, especially the very manual labor tasks of work that get done that eat up so many hours. What can we do to expedite that process and cut it down from hours to minutes? That's going to be huge down the road for companies like us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe
There's
just
just,
oh, go ahead, Ken.
I was just going to say, there's just so much art that goes into modern mobile games, modern PC games. And to echo again, both of your points is it's not here today, but the progress we've made over the last 12 months has been significant. I'm sure you all on the call remember Midjourney appearing what feels like less than a year ago. It feels like it wasn't there really recently. And now we're to the point where you can prompt something, have it create an image for you, have it then be sent to another service, have it 3D modeled, have it sent to another service, have it cut out, have it sent to another service, and have it rigged. And like so, and that's like almost half of the pipeline. And there's only half of the pipeline left, and that'll be solved within 6 months, 12 months. So
Yeah,
it's a
actually,
really
Ken, what
push.
you're talking about, there's a company called Ready Player Me. I saw their demo of this thing. They're absolutely working towards exactly what you're talking about, and we'll see where they get to. But they seem to be doing promising stuff there.
Yeah.
Another
So
example is I just met with a company today that's building generative music, and it's all license-free music. So it's all created
Wow.
based on models. And so think about how much time it takes a sound engineer to put together background music, program it for when you hit certain milestones in a world or a quest or whatever. If AI can potentially do that now, like
yeah.
that's
Right.
huge.
I think it was Alan Adham. Might have been somebody else, but I think it was Alan Adham who said that the jobs in an art studio are going to change significantly. You're not going to lose your job to AI, but you're going to lose it to the person sitting next to you who is using AI.
Right.
And I do think that's going to happen. Like on games that are like 700 people, like World of Warcraft, or even larger, more than half of those developers are artists, and that might shrink down to less than 100 people versus the 300 or 400 people that it is now, because each of those people is producing 3 or 4 times the amount of art that they were producing beforehand using these tools. So, I mean, it will drastically change our industry, but I don't think that means that we're going to have net less games being made. We're going to have the same amount of developers. We're just going to be producing 3 or 4 times the amount of content we were beforehand. What we will need is a way to filter out all the crap that is being produced by all these extra studios that are going to be popping up.
Yeah. So one last one from me, and then I'll hand it over to you guys, is just the criticality of UA and marketing. So we were at the Gamemakers GDC dinner with Shang from Century, but I won't talk about the specific details from there just because I'm not sure if we have permission to talk about that on his behalf, but I'll just say the general theme is that marketing and UA is definitely critical. There are pretty huge points of emphasis, teams, resources being deployed around UA and marketing to make games successful. And we're kind of back to like 5 to 10 years ago when it's not just about the product quality. It's not just about live ops. There's the 3 pillars. You have to have a great product, you have to have a great live ops, and you have to have great UA marketing. And so we're back to that. You need all 3 of those to be successful in the mobile market today. And with that, let me open it up to you guys. What else do you guys see? Themes, trends that we should be talking about?
I mean, that covers a huge swath of what was at GDC. I mean, UGC is a huge one. I think we're going to go into that a little bit later. AI was literally everywhere. I heard from multiple VCs that your studio is just not going to get funded if you don't have AI somewhere in your slide deck. That's concerning, because back to my previous point, like about the board members forcing you into specific design space, that makes my skin crawl a little bit as a player focused designer. Like, okay, now I have to work in this space to get funding. I think it's a shame that we can't talk about the Century Games information, because I think that would blow people's minds, the specifics there. But yes, I want to echo that point. It is absolutely imperative that you put as much resources as you can into marketing and UA, because that is unfortunately 60%, maybe more, of our business, right? Like it's all about getting people into your game. So, but yeah, and I think the last one that was blew up, you have it here as like the last topic, which is the Sensor Tower data AI merger. That's going to be a interesting thing for us product managers over the next couple of months to see how that rolls out as those products kind of consolidate and merge together.
Yeah, and Brett, you know both of those companies very well. What are your thoughts on
A little
the
biased.
merger?
A little biased, though.
Okay.
I don't know if I can speak unbiasedly about both of them. I'm an internal optimist on all these things. I'm an optimist about the industry, about the changes, about it. Maybe that's because I've been running my own company for 8 years, and you kind of have to be. But I'm excited for the merger. I feel as though the data providers are at an interesting intersection with what's going on with IDFA and moving so much revenue off the platform. That's a difficult problem that they are going to need to solve. And I think now that they're one entity, data.ai and Sensor Tower, it's going to allow them to focus so much more on that. And having had conversations with both groups, I know Sensor Tower is super product focused, and they're very good at listening to game developers, and they both are. I'm sort of speaking as Sensor Towers and data.ai as one now. But I'm kind of excited for it. I mean, I know it's a little scary for the developers, but the fact that they're going to get back to just like focusing on product, figuring out how they're going to incorporate off-platform revenue and how they're going to add some new cool stuff, like that's exciting to me, and exciting as a partner of both of theirs. So I'm kind of excited.
Which service do you prefer?
Don't make him answer that.
Sensor Tower.
Sensor Tower. Yeah.
Both.
I will say
Both. I mean, they're entity, they're one at this point. Full disclosure, we have partnerships with both of them. So
I will say it can be worrisome. Like there is a risk that they just start jacking up prices. I don't think that's who they are, but like, and if they do that, I think some of the large publishers are going to just be forced to build their own analytic systems to at least have some negotiating leverage on price, right? I mean, so it could go south quickly. I don't think it will. I think what we have seen is, at least for Sensor Tower, it is a testament to their strategy that they diversified a little bit. I think it gave them a little bit more resilience against what's going on in mobile gaming. They bought Pathmatics, they've done some other things, whereas data.ai, NAAP Annie has kind of stayed true to who they are in kind of a single vertical or a smaller set of verticals. And so I think that's something to see kind of play out here. But I was chatting with some of the Sensor Tower people at GDC. It sounds like they're excited. I mean, I know there was layoffs, but they are excited to bring on a lot of the employees to really help them do more than what they've been able to do and have more resources to invest. And so that could just be the marketing spiel, and they're good at it. But I do kind of believe it, and that's exciting if they can build lots of cool new features and tools for developers on all platforms, including an area that's really untapped is UGC platforms, is not really professionally covered. And it'd be interesting to see if that's somewhere where they go next also.
Yeah, it did seem most of the developers that were speaking about the merger were most worried about prices. They're like, I think it might jack up the prices. So that seems to be the biggest concern and expectations from a lot of people in the industry. I also do think, however, that this is a big opportunity for some of the second tier guys out there, because I think the market will be looking for the next backup. But those guys were so far away in terms of scale and services. So, but I think one of them is going to make a big step forward. I would assume that of the players, there's probably two that I would be looking at most closely, which is App Figures and then Social PETA. Now, I've told the Social PETA guy, first of all, your name sucks big time. Like Social PETA makes no freaking sense as a name. They haven't listened to me, so I would say maybe.
hey, not everyone like wants feedback like we do. That's a lesson I've had to learn over 40 years. Not all of us were raised in households where that came like every 5 minutes. Just FYI. I actually, funny story. I was meeting with someone I love at GDC as a person, and I've worked with for a very long time, Talia at Plarium. I can give her a shout out because she's amazing. But she was giving me a bunch of feedback, and I was like, "Oh, this is so great! This is so great!" And at the end, she goes, "Oh, and last thing, take a public speaking course." And I was like, oh, I was like, Talia, you went too far. You went too far. I was like, I'm gonna have to end this meeting 5 minutes early to go cry in the bathroom for 5 minutes before my next meeting. And I told that to my wife. She got a really good crack out of it. And I don't know. That was, you asked me to say some jokes. I'm gonna make fun of
You
myself for.
should, yeah.
Shout out to Talia. I appreciate all of her very great feedback. And not everyone appreciates it as much as we do. You know what I'm saying? So,
Yeah, but I fully expect one of those guys to maybe double, triple more their business, just because I do think that the market's going to look for a viable number two.
At the
I
very
don't know.
least,
It's
the large
hard. It's hard.
publishers.
That business is hard, and I don't think data AI was doing anything per se wrong. I think what they ran into is that they just raised so much capital that the valuation that they were looking for just wasn't there, because the market is not necessarily, the
Yeah,
TAM is not as big as they potentially thought it was. All those things you were talking about before, Matthew, about the market conditions, but I really think they just ran into the fact that they raised 170 something million or 165 or whatever it was, and they just couldn't get that
yeah,
700
yeah.
to.
Maybe we could talk about more specifics of the deal in the rumor section, or if we're
Yeah,
if we're looking for a future
not really.
sponsorship from Sensor Tower, maybe we shouldn't say anything. But
No, yeah,
but yeah, maybe we could talk about that a little bit.
yeah, it's not that
Um,
important to developers.
okay. So yeah, let's go to the next section then, unless you guys have anything more. But Ken, I know you were at a lot of the GDC talks. I haven't gone to any GDC talks for the last 2 to 3 years, because every time I bought a pass, it was just a huge waste of money. I would average 1.5 sessions per year, which I just didn't think was worth it. But I'm glad to know that you went to those talks. Probably the one talk that I did kind of feel like I wanted to go to, but I and that might that what potentially would have been worth getting the pass for is the Frank Squared, the Frank plus Frank Supercell talk. And I know you went to that one, so definitely
Yeah.
excited to hear more about some of the key GDC talks and what you learned. But do you want to take us away in that section, Ken?
Yeah, I can do that. I'm curious to learn more about, like, if you brought PMs along with you, would you advise them to go to these talks, or like, is the reason why you don't go to them because there's just so much more value in the hotel lobbies versus the talks? Because I do find that many of the talks to be valuable. It's just, is it value
Yeah,
versus
no,
value?
I would say for me, the problem with the GDC talks is that some of them are great, some of them are gold, but they're very few.
Mm.
And so, and for me, like, because I've got so many meetings outside of GDC, it makes it hard for me to go into some of those talks. There's usually always conflicts. And, if you allow your schedule to go, I mean, you can fill up your entire day with 30-minute blocks of meetings. So this is something I actively fight against. But yeah, I would say as a PM, probably talks are more important. When you're kind of more in the executive side, then it's what's more important are these private dinners, these kind of private events and things like that, to be able to really get to understand, well, one to develop your relationships with partners and things like that, but also some really key information and important insights usually come from the private stuff.
Yeah, I totally
Yeah,
get
I
it.
mean, I didn't have a pass, but I'm on the biz dev side of things, right? So it's
Yeah.
it's not relevant for me, and so I think that's an important thing to remember is you can look at the schedule and you can kind of understand what's going on, and you can assess if it's even going to make sense just from the topics that are there. For someone like me, it doesn't make sense because all my meetings are one to one that I need to have, and so most of it's in hotel lobbies, right, and or in hotel rooms potentially, and so for someone like in my role, it doesn't make any sense. But I can totally see the value for some people who are definitely in the PM side or are actually trying to learn and take more best practices back to their teams. There's also the cost consideration, right? Is it if you're a company in this environment, is it worth sending your people just to go listen to people talk when you could eventually just watch that online too, right? Because they do put
Yeah,
this stuff online as well. So I think that's a consideration as well for some companies who are trying to be efficient and save some money right now.
yeah. I guess for me, what a key question there is it more valuable to send folks in person to these talks because the GDC Vault Pass gets you all of the content as well, and what the trade-offs are for that? It's an extra, I think,
Yeah.
grand just to send them to the
Yeah, it's
talks.
it's also dangerous. I remember a startup telling me that they sent four people to GDC, and then after GDC, they lost two of them.
Yep,
They got poached. And
I've
it was
literally had
also the cost. I
bosses.
mean, it's not just the extra cost of the pass; it's hotel, it's flights, it's
Yeah,
everything, right? And so
Yeah,
yeah,
when you add it up, like, and if they're at GDC, they're not doing something else, right? Like at
yeah,
least for me, being at GDC and doing those meetings is my day job, right? If
it's work. Yeah.
if a developer or a PM is sitting in these lectures all day, they're not
Hey, learning is work,
developing or
man.
PMing a project, right? And so
Learning is work.
learning is work. Some
Well,
Yeah,
it's
people have to
interesting.
say
absolutely.
It's also. I mean, there's probably at this point a 75% chance you're coming home with some kind of cold or something like that,
COVID or
right?
whatever. Yeah.
So it's yeah. I mean,
I am shocked that I went to both GDC and then I went to New York this week for Playfronts, and I'm not sick
yeah.
yet, at least.
I I know, right? And I mean, the amount of people I talk to that are sick this week, it's just tons. So it is a kind of an interesting question. I don't think people think about it enough. Is like, what is the true cost of going to a conference? I
right.
struggle with that for sure because it's a whole day I'm not doing work, and that's extremely costly. So I go halfway where I'll meet, but I'll have time in between to check email, to do some work, to respond, and that makes it manageable. But it's hard.
All right.
Probably actually the first, not just to give it some props, the first report that we ever or I ever wrote. I say we, but it was just me at the beginning. And it was a talk at GDC that I went to on Crossy Roads. And the guys who started Crossy Roads did an unbelievable talk on Crossy Roads and put
Hmm.
on all of their numbers because they were like an independent development studio and they crushed it and they made an amazing game and they were trying to give back to the community and they put up their KPIs, their revenue numbers, their retention numbers, everything that they did. It was pretty incredible. And I ended up writing our first report on that talk and Crossy Roads in general. And so I'm just trying to give GDC Talks a shout out here and
Yeah.
tell probably not a very interesting story, but
Those are the best talks. I go into that a little bit here in a
yeah.
second, but like it reminds me of Emily Greer at Congregate. All of her talks
Yep.
were in a
Oh my
similar vein where
goodness,
she shares like all
dude.
of Congregate's
Yep.
KPIs to the world, which is
The
cool.
idle games talk
Yeah,
from GDC. But again, I think that one I've listened to is just a ton on the Vault, and I
yeah.
completely agree. And in fact, there's a bunch of videos that I want to check out on the Vault already, and I was checking to see when they're going to go live for that reason. So I
But again,
agree.
I'm not saying that none of them are useful. Like there's clearly value in these things.
That's
You
what you
know, it
said.
just
You
it
said
depends
none
on
was.
it. You
You
just
said none.
yeah.
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 With that in mind, I'll go over my top 3
Great.
talks from
All right. Yeah.
the GDC. So my number 1, I'll start at the top, is the Frank Squared talk from Supercell. So this is Frank Yan and Frank Kinenberg, the GM and the senior game designer working on Brawlstars. So the purpose of this talk was to review their removal of loot boxes from Brawlstars. Initially, when they pitched this talk to the GDC team, it was supposed to be a gloomy affair because at the time, Brawl Stars revenue and engagement has tanked significantly, and they wanted to show sort of the learnings from that talk, or sorry, the learnings from that event in that talk. Halfway through the year, they made some significant live ops changes and added a pseudo loot box back into the game, and every single one of their metrics basically did a 180, and now they are on a path to go straight to the moon. So it was a really, really interesting talk. They showed their internal revenue dashboards without the y-axis. So we know that between summer of last year and last month, they've 8.8x'd their revenue, which is insane. Like we can sort of guess what those numbers are using data.ai numbers, which is now on track to being one of Supercell's most profitable games. They did mention in the talk as well that it's now passed a couple $1 billion in revenue, so huge franchise for them. The team there is growing in size to be able to live operate it at this scale, which I think is in on track with Ilka's sort of commitment to growing the teams to live op for the future and be able to compete against some of these huge teams from Scopely and other large mobile developers. They had some really, really good actionable learnings, which is one of the key things I look for in talks that kind of like push them ahead of other companies. They're not really marketing pitches. They're really focused on spreading those learnings out within the entire community. And those learnings, just to briefly kind of go over them here, were to simplify when you're wrestling with a complex design, to reduce noise when you're rolling out big changes, because those big changes can make it difficult to do analysis. That big changes by themselves are not a silver bullet. That oftentimes it's better to do lots of small changes than one large change, especially from a dev cost perspective. To find people that challenge you, both in the design space, it's very easy to get stuck into a specific design paradigm, and those challenges can come from any part of the team. And one of the funniest ones was that random rewards are exciting, and that was kind of like the biggest one of the talk, that players have these brains that react very positively to random rewards. Folks are there's a really classic book in product management called, it's by Nerial. I'm sure Brett, is it called Hooked? Something like that. It's like the classic retention loop, and one of them is like one of the steps in the classic retention loop is random rewards. And if you remove that from the retention loop, players tend to retain less. So because they removed this random rewards portion of their core loop, players were churning and they've added it back in, and now they're not. And then their last learning was to just double down on retention-based momentum. So, like as you've seen in some of the charts that they had in their talk, they also grew their DAO during this time period by, I think it's like almost 4 times. Maybe it was like 3.5 times, something like that. So pretty significant overall performance. It was great to see the data minus y-axis. We can guess what the y-axis are from data.ai, but it was great to see that. It was great to see that how humble they were. It was not a marketing talk, which many of these things can be. So yeah, that was definitely my top one. I think everybody should watch it on the Vault. Watch it a few times if you can. My number 2 talk was King's AI talk. And that was one because everybody in your social circle is going to be talking about AI. And this is one of the few use cases for how it's actually being used at a $1 billion studio to improve live ops at that studio. King's currently using it on Candy Crush Soda Saga to reduce a significant portion of a specific task in one of their game design pipelines. So there's this step inside of the pipeline where after generating a new level that they have to like iterate and tweak and to get like a specific score from from one of their like test bots. And this AI, one, can generate the level first to start off, and then two, it can run tweaks, create different tweaks using like machine learning, so that they have to like press the button less times. And they've basically reduced the total time that game designers have to spend on new level creation by something like 65%. So that was really kind of cool. And they went into really, really deep detail on their models. They like showed the models on screen. So like if you're there in the chat and you're quite a technical person, not chat, in the talk, you're quite a technical person, you can use some of that information for your own studio if you're, want to take this approach. I think one of the interesting takeaways from people in the audience during the questioning section of it was that they were asked if this meant that they were going to increase their level cadence, and they said no, which translates to we are no longer going to need 65% of our game designers working on new levels. So it's a arrow in the quiver of the people saying that this is AI thing is going to reduce jobs. It's interesting point of view to me. And so the third one I wanted to talk about, just because it seemed to be everywhere, and I wasn't super happy with how the GDC folks rolled these out. They were overlapping. Was Epic's UEFN talks, and these were some of the best talks as well. I had a friend go to the one that I couldn't attend, and we both really enjoyed them. This is where Epic sort of highlighted the current performance of UEFN. They highlighted their ongoing roadmaps for UEFN. That's where they debuted how much money they were making. They debuted certain things like the creator follower button, things like that. I think one of the reasons why I liked this talk specifically was because it's one of these talks that makes the developers in the room feel like there's wins in the sails, so to speak, inside of the industry. Where if people are telling you the next big thing on the horizon is UGC, this is one of the biggest UGC creators telling you, hey, these are all the tools we're providing you. So it's more like a hype talk, if anything. And also allows us as developers to kind of like come up with new ideas for how we're going to match our products around these new tools that they're rolling out. I still think they have a long ways to go. Something like Twitch's bounty board program is going to be needed for UGC platforms like this, just to kind of allow developers a way to sell into the platform. But yeah, like those were my top three talks together. There was just a lot of really good ones this year, more so than what I've heard in the past. To Joe's point earlier, there was a lot of really sold out. Or sorry, there's a lot of sold out ones. There's one I really wanted to get into, which was the Gen AI one that had like a line wrapped around the entirety of the South Moscone Hall. So like literally the line looped around, and the back of the line was at the front door. It was crazy, like 1,000 people waiting to get inside. So a lot of people eager for that. Any thoughts? I have a few more things to go on.
I would jump in on UEFN because they did announce a lot of cool things at GDC, and this is kind of the second year that they've had UEFN at GDC because they announced it last year. A lot of good updates. Just before GDC, they released progression saving, which literally is table stakes for building games, right? And so they're getting there. They're rolling out more features. There's still a lot of question marks around the viability of building a game's business on it rather than it just being a professional modding platform, because that's really what it is right now. It's really just a professional Fortnite modding platform at this point. But for example, you can't do, it's a UGC platform, but you can't literally do UGC. You can't do avatar items because Epic still controls that, because that's how they make all their money in Fortnite VR, right? Is from cosmetics, right? And so how does the platform evolve to become more encompassing to all the features that are vibrant on other platforms like Roblox? If they really do want to compete with Roblox, one of the most engaged features is the avatar economy. And if you keep that gated behind Epic at the parent level, that's going to be very tough to build that community around.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, but one thing it does seem clear is that I had mentioned that Liveops and AI were key themes of this GDC, and certainly the talks that you mentioned seem to be oriented on Liveops or AI in some way. So I definitely think people should understand that this is kind of the current state of our industry, right? Where new game projects, many of them are getting canceled. Resources are being shifted to Liveops, which is why the industry is so focused on Liveops right now. And because margins are tighter, we're operating in a more difficult environment. So Liveops becomes increasingly important. And then on the AI side, that's kind of like the hope for the future and where there's all sorts of promise. And so those two areas to me make a lot of sense in terms of where we should be focusing. Maybe I should talk about it more in the rumor section. Although I think, Matthew, you're saying, we talked about this before, you're saying the data is already there, but I did hear that in terms of UEFN, that kind of like the word on the street was that there's a lot of folks at Epic who believe that whatever the 340 million or 300 million plus payout is more of a subsidy right now, that the UEFN experiences aren't actually, even though the current narrative by even Epic or others is that, hey, this is driving a lot of additional engagement and blah, blah, blah to Fortnite. But what I'm hearing is that actually most of the gains that we saw in UEFN or in Fortnite were not because of UEFN experiences, but more because of Fortnite Classic. And so,
Yeah, I mean, you can look at the data on Fortnite GG, and I
okay,
mean, put that in the
sure.
video and the
Yeah,
podcast notes, right? If you just look at literally right now while we're recording, there are 2.9 million people on Fortnite, the entire platform. 1.8 million of them are inside of Epic experiences. So
yeah,
Epic is getting the majority of the engagement, and
yeah,
the only monetization is engagement-based payouts right now. So Epic is getting 2/3, 3/4 of the engagement. They're getting 2/3 or 3/4 of the engagement payouts, and that's before you even consider that. I have to go back and check. I think they also get a cut of what they pay out to other creators, right? I think there's a commission they take on the payouts to the other creators. I have to go back and double check that, right? So their share of the payouts might even be higher than their share of engagement at that point as well.
right. Okay. Ken, did you say you have a few other things or?
Yeah, this is just sort of like advice for people like me that are going to go to GDC that are not executives, and some
Okay.
things to avoid. Sort of along the lines of some of the things we're talking about at the top of this section, which is like, do you need a GDC pass to go to GDC? I would say that the first one is no, you don't really need one. A good thing to get is the Expo pass, just so that you can get into the Expo itself. There's a lot of value in going to the different booths, talking to people. That does open up a lot of networking for the more junior and mid-level folks, and also gets you into a lot of the sort of like the free talks, I would say, like the more sponsored talks. But if you want to buy a pass and don't want to pay for the full value of the pass, you can. My advice would be to get the back half of the week instead of the front half of the week. The front half of the week tends to be the more like, I don't know, how do I put this? The front half of the week tends to be about like
More of like the marketing type.
marketing, yeah, and like
No, it is. Like, I mean, when Epic does the State of Unreal, like that is a marketing event, right? Whereas opposed to you go to the specific talks on specific technologies or product roadmaps, right? That's going to be a different audience, a different conversation. I fully hear what you're saying.
Yeah, and then the back half of the week is more like PM learnings and like really good meaty talks that are more our style. So yeah, then the last sort of bit of advice I'll say is look for talks that are not about shilling. Like a lot of these talks that you'll see ahead of time are going to be from Expo sponsors or like really, really big sponsors like Google or AWS or whomever. And if the entire talk is just like Google or a huge sponsor, don't go to it. 99% of the time, they're terrible. I went to one that was like talking about monetization best practices, and it was literally just like people who've never worked on a game before, and their takeaway advice that I got from them was that you should do localized pricing. And I was like, I'm glad I wasted an hour coming, and you'll see that kind of as a common theme. I think that was one of Joe's points earlier, is there's a lot of really bad talks because people paid to sponsor these events and they deserve a talk apparently from that. So avoid those,
Yeah.
and you can kind of figure out.
They're not all bad. So I mean, I've heard a lot of positive things about the Clever Tap AWS, the event that I moderated, which I thought was important, right?
No big
I
deal.
did
That
just
I
to
hear a lot of
self.
positive things about the event that I moderated.
that event specifically.
Joseph, please
That's
give me
worse
some
than having
tougher
no
content
access
to
to
make
the
fun
event.
of.
First off,
There was
that was
one
not.
really awesome event that I went to.
Oh yeah,
It
it was
was the
mine.
one that I presented at.
First off, that event was not inside a GDC. That was like an external event, and
Right.
you had a lot of game makers in that event, right? Like that
Okay,
was
I
not
will
just
say, kidding aside, that was an awesome event, and I
was a good
have
event.
posted on LinkedIn. It was epic, like, and I don't just mean that lightly.
All right, so
I
full
walked into,
disclosure,
yeah,
full
that was
disclosure, I signed up to go. My flight got moved up, so I couldn't make it. So someone else in our community went instead of me. So I technically was there. He just used my
Okay.
name to get in because I had
yeah. I
RSVP'd.
mean, it was pretty sweet, and I posted about it. Bing Gordon led off. It was awesome. There was some really insightful stuff. Alan went second, founder of Blizzard, and yeah, it's just funny you said, "JK, I'm messing. I love you. You did a great job. That was awesome."
Is that
Yeah,
the
but
same hoodie you wore?
I'll
The flip
it
second
hoodie?
that,
is.
even
It's
though
the
you're giving
same hoodie.
yourself props. Even though you're giving yourself props, I'll give you props too.
It's the year of efficiency, or the second year of efficiency.
The only
He's
thing that
recycling.
was almost as good was the talk that I gave earlier in the day.
uh,
It wasn't. I'm kidding.
yeah. But to your point, Ken, I think like, yeah, so picking good talks, and then one bit of advice I would say is try to find the private events, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
those are hard. But those are some of the most valuable. Some of them I know like the Korean gaming community has like a secret dinner thing, which I was not invited to this year. Thanks, guys. But like, some of those talks with different communities and things like that are the best. So however you can get into the private events and dinners and things like that, I think is
Yeah.
for me the biggest part of GDC.
Most of the parties suck, by the way, because like nerds are awkward and we don't like to dance. They're too loud to network in, so they're just like
Yeah.
awful. Go to the dinners instead.
Yeah, I've completely avoided those now, but yeah, I remember attending some of those in the past.
I went to a D&D dinner this time, and it was phenomenal. It was
Oh,
sponsored by Sandlo, and then they had like professional DMs. It was so much fun. It was
oh,
really, really good.
nice. Yeah, that definitely sounds like a good idea.
I didn't go, but I heard the Sunday night Dungeons and Dragons event, like the D&D competition, where I think Ben Brody won,
Ben
is what I
Brody
saw
won.
posted on
Yeah.
LinkedIn, is like the best event at GDC.
It wasn't Dungeons and Dragons, it was Magic the Gathering.
Oh, it was Magic. It was Magic. Sorry, that's what I meant. Yeah. The
Yeah.
Magic the Gathering tournament.
Yeah, it was apparently pretty amazing. So yeah, that's kind of my takeaway from those talks and some of the key learnings you can have from outside of it.
Okay. So maybe third then in terms of key takeaways is what are the specific key takeaways? And we've talked about some of the trends and things, but whether it's from that mix or other things, what was most valuable to you guys from GDC?
I think that there's an awakening in terms of people looking for what's going to come next now that mobile is saturated and mature, right? And this kind of goes into the why did mobile take off so well? I mean, part of it was we connected 5 billion people to the internet that didn't have internet before, or whatever it was, right? With mobile devices, and the mobile gaming rode on the coattails of that. So I don't think there's going to be necessarily another platform that takes off on a rocket ship like mobile did, especially China. But whether it's actually Web3, and I do think there's some cool things happening in Web3 that are still going to take a long time to be flushed out, whether it's UGC, which obviously where I work, so I'm bullish on that, but I try to keep myself grounded. I think there are other platforms that are starting to kind of find themselves and really start to find a footing to help us potentially grow on top of us, what's going to be effectively a stable, mature industry. Like mobile's not going to grow much, console's not going to grow much, PC's not going to grow much. These are large industries, but the double-digit days of growth are gone. And so for me, it's identifying where the puck is going next.
Yeah, is the growth gone? Because it seems like, well, I would agree with you on the console side. It seems consoles kind of flattish to losing a bit. But if you were to smooth out the COVID,
It's
because there
okay.
was,
So mobile's a GDP plus, maybe a GDP plus growth business. Like
yeah,
it's not growing 20% anymore, right?
sure,
And
yeah. But
it's going to grow its
yeah,
income growth effectively.
right. Okay.
I'm gonna counter that with what Bing Gordon rhymed on stage that I
Oh
have
yeah.
pulled up from Clever Tap. So Bing Gordon, just I guess he's really into rhyming, and so he pulled out his phone and did a poem, and it I pulled it up here because it counters what you're saying. And Bing Gordon's big theme was that, and I'll read it. It was that basically, okay, I'm gonna read the paragraph. Loving what you do, however, is more controllable than making big bucks. And remember, as we grew the gaming industry 100-fold, 75% of the time, investors could prove that the gaming biz would always suck. And I loved his rhetoric because his basically went through stories of the every single time that people said the gaming industry was dead, it was mature, it would never be this, it would never be that. Told really cool stories about Madden and how just a bunch of really great stories of the 25 years he's been in the gaming industry and how it was never going to do this, never going to do that. And that today we are here again where the gaming industry is dead and it sucks and never move on. It's over. And I again a little bit more of an optimist. I'm not saying that you said that, Matthew. I'm just trying to make this interesting and say the other side is my takeaway from GDC from that talk in particular was that JK gives the best roundtables, A, and B, it's like the gaming industry grows from unexpected stuff that most people can't see, and so well, I think
No,
something's coming
fully
out of
agree,
that.
and that's kind of what
Yeah,
I was trying to allude to, is that, like, trying to identify what's the next thing that's gonna be the next catalyst
yeah.
for growth, because what we have today is kind of mature, right? And so it's I don't think mobile is going to double again, right? It's going to be something else. I mean, okay, maybe you
I
disagree,
could
like,
see
that's
it.
that
I could see mobile doubling. I could see mobile doubling in revenue per user. I could that seems very feasible to me. In the next 10 years, I could see us looking back and going, I can't believe people only spend $4 a month or whatever they spend on average.
Yeah. I
Inflation
mean,
is crazy.
if we
What?
And
get
Yeah.
I was
closer,
at PlayFronts in New York this week, and
uh,
there was a presentation from Activision Blizzard Media, which is like their advertising arm. And one of the comments that I heard that made me chuckle inside was, "We're not too far away from more money being made on advertising in games than in-game spending," which made me chuckle. But that's just a little anecdote. So some people are thinking there's ways to monetize on top of IEP as well, extremely so.
yeah, Brett, to your point on doubling, I think you're right because when we look at the Chinese market, for example, we're talking dramatically higher per player monetization and convert like a like I've in the past we've launched a game before where a conversion in US might be 2%, but in China it's like 10%.
Yeah,
So
but
And
you
look at
can't.
ARP DAOs in Japan versus the United States as well. If you're
yeah,
Yeah,
assuming that like
you
stable
can't
first
you can't
tier one,
extract across geographies like that. You have to look at each of them individually because every market is extremely different. So,
understood, but I think that we do have to what I'm saying is like to Brett's point, I do think we do have some extra capacity even without like the top line growth and install base and things like that on a per player monetization or change the culture of pay. I think it's possible. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I
I mean,
completely
if
agree.
ARPDAU grows
And
7%
I
a
think a lot of
year
the revenue
for
that moved on to mobile recently that everybody's sort of saying is going away from gaming is really just cable revenue getting put on the mobile platform, which
Mhm.
is just more money, which is another example of how much people are willing to spend on entertainment that is greater than what they're spending on mobile games.
Yep.
Cable is $250 a month, right? And at this point, cable's dying, and now people are getting Hulu and all that other stuff. But even that could be dying, right? I mean, so I don't know. I mean, I'm just saying I could see it. I
Yeah,
I,
if
I wouldn't be surprised
ARPDAU
if
in the
5 years
industry,
from now we're all spending way more money on the phone. I mean, and certainly when my kids get older, they will not be hesitating to spend 5 times as much money on their mobile device than I am.
yeah, if ARPDAU grows 7% a year for a decade, it doubles. So like that's kind of what has to happen.
yeah,
Yeah.
or spending
So
behavior can increase as well potentially. But
No, yeah. So yeah,
yeah,
if people spend 7% more a year for a decade, we spend more per person. We double the spend per person over a decade.
yeah. Okay, so for me, the biggest takeaway, and not to beat a dead horse, but I think we got to really like for me, I was kind of all in on AI before GDC, but after GDC, it's like I feel even more strongly that AI is critical, right? And there's just so many companies I met with working on interesting new applications of AI, and even if the vast majority of them are fail, but in terms of the resources, energy, effort being put into AI, as well as the significant ramp in capabilities and the speed at which improvements are happening. And I mentioned this during the panel, but the AI panel with CleverTap and AWS, but like this is the thing that's so hard for us as human beings to understand is when we see exponential growth. And so if you miss this, you might be dead, or it's gonna, like, you really should be paying very close attention to what's happening in AI. And if people are right, because I actually am more optimistic on AI than I have been on many things in my lifetime. But I do think that if people are right, and I actually am kind of in the camp that this might actually be as big or bigger than internet, then huge fortunes are going to be made in the in the not too distant future. And you definitely do not want to be on the losing side of getting screwed up by AI. You want to be the guy leveraging to Alan Adams' point, the guy leveraging the AI instead of the person being replaced by the AI. And maybe one final point on just key takeaways is I kind of was reminded the importance of just random serendipitous meetings with people talking about random things, and then finding new people who have really great insights and building relationships with those people. For me, was kind of great at GDC is being able to have those kinds of just random meetings and getting to know people better, hopefully that we can work with in the future. Anything else, guys? You want to bring up key takeaways, or should we wrap this up?
I just, one other thing that I think was in the notes was direct to consumer and web stores, right? And like, I
Yeah.
think Playtika is kind of like the vanguard. Like, I think they're furthest ahead in driving a significant portion of revenue from web stores. Like, I think that, I mean, maybe it evolves. I kind of agree with what Chris said a while back, that this is kind of the Flex Seal on the boat scenario a little bit, in the sense that this is a way to improve margins and ARPU, but it doesn't fix UA, right? And so when you have a game that has significant whales, you can extract more value from them for yourself by web stores, but at least to date, it doesn't fix UA. And maybe these stores become more like app stores, especially with some of the changes happening on the app store platforms. And then they become not just margin accretive, but they can also become full UA channels. And then that becomes actually more interesting.
Okay. All right. So let's wrap it up with any rumors. There's a number. There's most of the rumors I think I can't talk about publicly here, but maybe a few things, or just generalized rumors, would be one is that crypto is actually not dead, that a lot of
Whoa.
people think it is, and they've kind of given up on it, but there are a number of studios still making tons of money, including a couple who have, I guess, sold on their token sales, have done extremely well. I've never gotten into the whole crypto thing, so I'm not as familiar with that market, but I'd hope for the best for any game dev studio out there. And to the extent that that's back, good for them. And hopefully they can kind of, it's great if they're able to figure that out. I personally just don't know much about it.
I actually saw a post on LinkedIn today. I got to
Mhm.
go back. I'll go back and try to find it and share it. It was along the lines of the number of active transacting wallets in Web3 games just
Okay.
eclipsed the prior peak from when
Oh,
Web3 games were popular in
makes sense
21 and
then.
22. It's still
Yeah.
not, it's still barely like 3 million active wallets. So like, we're
Okay.
talking the entire total user base of Web3 gaming is like 3 million active players when we have 3 billion mobile gamers, right? So we're still talking about a tiny market, but yeah, I mean, I think there's excitement and enthusiasm, but it's still mostly crypto natives who are price sensitive, right? Bitcoin has doubled because of lots of things, including the ETFs and institutionalization of it. Ethereum ETFs are probably coming. I know people debate that, and this is my dorky finance and ETF background speaking, but it seems to be that Ethereum ETFs will happen in this year at some point. Also, the problem is that the US already ruled that everything besides Bitcoin and Ethereum is a security. And so if you're transacting in it, you're technically committing securities fraud if you don't have a exchange license. And that's
Okay.
including games.
Yeah.
As the
Go ahead.
only person here that's working on Web3 games, I can tell you that I'm personally pessimistic,
Okay.
but also I probably should not go more into how pessimistic I am for like non-disparagement clauses and stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm not a, I think there's going to be more headwinds. A lot of what
Okay.
you're seeing now is because of Bitcoin pumping.
Ah,
And yeah, I'm pessimistic. I'll maybe talk about it more in the future, but I don't think this is going to last.
okay.
But I mean, let's all, it ties back to the conversation we started with too around VC capital. I mean, there were so many studios in 21 and 22. You threw blockchain or Web3 in your pitch and you added a zero on your check. Right. And so, yes, the crypto markets have round tripped, but there's still not a return on all this capital that went into the space. And there probably maybe won't be for a lot of it. Right. And so I think from that perspective, it's still going to be very difficult. But I do think that there are some interesting things happening, and it's just I've evangelized the metaverse. I work in UGC gaming now, and I think similar to those concepts and those platforms, this is just a very long term play. And if you're putting in 8-figure checks right now, you're probably way too early.
Yeah, I don't. It feels like if people are making money, they're making money from selling coins, and then there's no like long term live ops plan here. There's a lot of people
Hmm.
like pumping up short term cash, and that's it. There's not a single, even Axie Infinity. There's not a single story that you can point to of like, hey, this game is successfully operating at $1 million a plus a month for years on end, and I don't think we'll see that for years, if ever. I'm very, very confident in that. You will see people selling $100 million worth of NFTs. You will see companies selling coins, their coin offerings for $50 million and so on, for all the reasons Matt has given. But that to me those are not game businesses. Maybe the crypto industry as a whole, you can kind of define it as that, but those are not game businesses. Those
No,
are,
it's finance masquerading as a game, 100%.
yeah. So
Right. Yeah, I did. I don't want to say specific names, but I did hear about some of these crypto games that raised a ton of money, and I'll tell you who it is afterwards. But some of these guys are reportedly, and maybe one of you guys told me, are just like out partying and stuff all the time, not really taking their game seriously. So
we know who you're
to
talking
your to
about.
your point, Ken, I do think that you might be like the point you're making about a game that's building longer term value. Yeah, maybe you're right. Based upon just some of the anecdotal stuff that I'm hearing as well, and hopefully those guys would take it more seriously. Or if the approach was, hey, this is just kind of like a money grab where we do our token sell, we grab a bunch of money, and then now we're flying on our private jets and going to these different islands and just chilling. Then I do think that's gonna potentially be longer term negative for the crypto gaming industry. So hopefully some of those guys stop doing that.
I keep on hearing this argument that there's a lot of players who want to own their asset, that they have this Counter-Strike skin and they wish they could have it and trade it and so on. It's like my experience in the industry thus far is that that's like 1 in 10,000 of the
Hmm.
players. Like every single other person is trying to flip assets. Like they are literally thinking about it in a way that would get them in hot water with the government. So like and we as developers cannot think like the 99 or 999,000 people or whatever. We have to only think about that one person. We are literally legally forced to think about that one player because we can't treat our products like securities, to Matt's point. We can't design for returns. We have to design for gameplay because if once we start addressing that return aspect of it, that's when you start like pushing us into a security space. So we absolutely cannot go down that route, and that puts us at a huge sort of like conflict with that player base, right? And it's just a really weird design space to be in. There's not a huge amount of players. I mean, I think if there's 3 million active wallets, what's going to happen is that they're going to be shifted between 4 or 5 super games. Each of those games is going to shark fin on a sale, die, shark fin on a sale, die, and just keep on going between the games. And that's not a sustainable business. So, yeah.
And like, and to your point about the NFT business model as a part of Web3 gaming, Roblox has its own equivalent of NFTs. They have limited UGC, right? No one makes money on limited UGC anymore. Like as soon as Roblox as a platform opened that up to all creators effectively with like very low minimum price floors and very low minimum capital constraints, the price of limited UGC fell off a cliff. Most developers use it as a UA tool at this point, not even, and they give it away for free. And so yes, there's demand for these items, but not demand to pay for them and not demand to trade them. There's demand to just collect them because they're free and have the latest cool thing.
Yeah.
Right. One other rumor that was going around are some of these sales of actually not only just some studios that are struggling, but I think you would be surprised at some of the names that some of the bankers are throwing around in terms of who's for sale, but even some studios that are at least on the surface doing very well. And also rumors, I think the EA thing now has been announced, but like there are some other bigger companies that have not fully gone through the efficiency cycle yet, where it does seem like whether it's coming very soon or later, that there's going to be additional rationalization happening. And some of the names mentioned are kind of surprising, but yeah, they're out there, and we'll see what happens to the industry after some of these fire sales complete. And
I would note for that for a lot of games companies, March
Mhm.
31st is the end of the fiscal year. So
Mm,
it kind of makes sense. Like that's why Embracer is trying to sell all these assets before March 31st because they want to
right,
get it done before the end of the fiscal year.
right,
Layoffs happen at the end of the fiscal year, right? Maybe the start of the new year. So timing wise, it doesn't completely not make sense. Or timing wise, it makes sense, right? In the sense
right,
that a lot of these EA, for example, March 31st fiscal year, we just saw Take Two buy Gearbox from
right.
Embracer, right? They're both on a March fiscal year, I believe, right? And so when you kind of start to line all this up, it does make sense. I do think that what's interesting about the Take Two Gearbox deal, and we don't have to get into that too much, but it was all stock. It was Take Two paid for it in all stock. They couldn't.
Yeah.
I don't think they could. I mean, I don't know. I don't talk to bankers, but it doesn't look like they could get debt financing with their leverage where it is already. And they didn't want to. They don't have the cash on hand necessarily to do that with their debt position, right? So I think that says a lot about the state of financing as well for these deals. And so when you're saying some are struggling even with the fire sale and they're trying to sell and they can't, I think you have to also consider the financing environment
Mm,
and
I
potentially the
see.
fact that creditors don't want to lend more money to the space because they got burned by Glue, by Zynga, by other big deals that have kind of gone belly up and they're stuck holding the bag on the debt side.
Right, and maybe that was the issue because I know that some of you also had mentioned that one of the rumors going around at GDC was a potential Gearbox MBO management buyout. But to your point, Matthew, if they're not able to access debt, most likely they can't get that to work. And so maybe that was why
Yeah,
they
an
wanted to
MBO
move to
is
Take Two.
usually very heavily debt driven when you do
Mhm.
it, right? And so
Yeah.
exactly, if they couldn't get the debt financing, then that makes sense why that kind of didn't go through. And that's why I still personally think Take Two overpaid, but like whatever, it's stock, it's phony money for them, phony money for them, right?
Yeah.
It's they can print that money if shareholders take the hit. And so I do think it's telling about the state of the industry, though, the fact that it was an all stock deal.
Okay. Yeah, and probably the only other rumors for whatever reason, and I think it was like, and some people did bring up the whole Monopoly Go thing, which is kind of funny because I still think not everyone fully understood the objective behind that. But for whatever reason, a lot of those folks that came and talked to me about that also would throw in their Scopely story. So Scopely's mad at me already, so I'm not going to mention these kind of rumors and stories that I heard, but I can talk to you guys about it offline. But certainly a lot of that. But besides that, I don't know. Do you guys have anything else in terms of rumors or things that you heard before we wrap it up? Or maybe Brett, you wanna you wanna tell us about some of the jokes that you were like, I don't know if you're comfortable sharing those, but I
I'm
thought
going to
it
Oh
was
put you on
man,
the
I just
spot. I
had
don't
a
know if you're
good
comfortable
laugh.
talking about it.
No, I mean, I had a couple good jokes, obviously, in the
yeah,
moment. I had a great time with everybody. The one joke I already told you, but the other one, which is my boy Solomon, who did put together that whole
yeah,
clever tap
it was awesome.
uh, thing, was amazing. But it was just, I got a good laugh out of the fact that A, he wanted me to speak after Bing Gordon, who founded EA, and Alan, who founded Blizzard, or anyone else to speak after him. And B, the fact that he ended up being the person speaking after those two people. So I thought that to
Yeah,
be kind of pretty funny because those two
yeah,
guys have just like epic past, and I've already said it, just amazing past, and it was a kind of a privilege to just go to this event and hear them speak. And I ended up actually waiting to talk to Alan afterwards, and I can say that he was so kind, modest, and awesome. And it was one of the highlights of GDC for me, for sure. So props to Solomon and JK for hosting that. I give you guys
and Brett was making fun of my outfit because I was just wearing this hoodie and sweats. But like, we're game developers. What do you want me to wear? A suit or something?
You're wearing Nike sweatpants, New Balance shoes, and a Nike sweatshirt, and that hat. And I was like, bro, thanks for getting dressed up for the event.
Next to Alan, Adham, and Dean Gordon, who are in like $1,000 suits. Really fancy outfits.
JK was trying to get his 10,000 steps in, and he just like walked right into the thing and just sat right down and just gave the panel.
All right. Okay, cool. Well, I think that's it then, guys. There's a wrap. GDC 2024. We got the key trends and themes, important takeaways, as well as a little few rumors here and there. And hopefully, if you guys go to one of the other private events later, I'd be happy to relay some of the other rumors that I can't speak publicly about, but happy to tell you guys in private. But all right, okay, that's it for our GDC 2024 wrap. It's more of a recap, not enough shit talking, but maybe next time we'll get that in. All right, that's it. Catch y'all later. Bye.